Science. At this point anymore, it's just a cringe cult. And what I mean by that is where what you're going to hear is people say, scientists say this, the scientific studies say that, we believe in science. That's all 100% garbage, especially for making decisions in your day-to-day life. Because first and foremost, at this point, if you hunt hard enough, you can find somebody with a PhD and throw them in a lab coat and get them to say damn near anything. Now, the cultists of science will say, oh, well, those are just fringe Looney Tunes on the periphery, and they don't really count. What we're talking about is the scientific consensus. That's where we get truth, and that's where we get what people should do in their day-to-day lives. To which I say, fair enough. But do you know what damn near every single scientific consensus in all the history of science had in common? It was friggin' wrong. That's what they had in common, and that it was some weirdo outsider who came in and proved them all wrong until the next weirdo outsider proved that person wrong as well. Everybody worships at the feet of Albert Einstein, but at his time in the beginning, he was the weirdo outsider, and there was the scientific consensus in the community of physicists that he was wrong. Until they eventually gave in and said that he was right. So scientific consensus means freaking nothing at all. The other thing that there's a freaking cult of is where they're talking about scientific studies. Well, here's the thing is with scientific studies is first off, do you know how to read them? Do you know what the difference is between a good study and a bad study? Because what you'll figure out once you start learning how to read scientific studies is that they can be set up in a way to say damn near anything. And that if you torture the data enough, it'll tell you anything you want to hear. So that's all useless. And what has happened is that you basically just have each little cult erects their own little science god, just like, remember learning about Mesopotamia in school, how each city-state had its own little god? Well, that's exactly what we have now, is that different little sects within the scientific cult all erect their little gods to their own little theories, and then from there, they'll go out and do studies to prove what they say is right, and then the other sects from the other gods will argue with them and say that they're wrong. It's, at this point, no different than a priest of Baal gutting a rabbit, looking at its liver, and saying, yep, the liver's clear, so that means that we can go to war next spring. And then some other priest telling them how they're wrong. And it's also convoluted, the way that these studies are done, that the average person can't make heads or tails of it. Same as before in ancient times. So, that's all trash. That's all worthless. Science's place is in producing stuff. Your phone, making sure a bridge stays up, planes, all the wonderful modern things. But science has no place at all in telling you what to do within the world. That historically has been the realm of theology, if you're more of a religious person, and philosophy, if you tend to be a little bit more secular. But science came into the scene about 200 years ago, give or take, and produced so many amazing things that now it's poking its nose in places it doesn't friggin' belong. So, how are you supposed to make decisions in this world? Well, what you're supposed to have is principles. I'll give you an example. I don't hit my wife. That's a principle. Why don't I hit my wife? Well, because she is a person that I love. She is smaller than me. She is weaker than me. And it is wrong to use pain or the threat of pain to get people in your life, especially people that you care about, to get them to do what you want. So that's a principle. Well, then I looked at it in the rest of my family and I said, well, wait a minute now. In principle, it's wrong to hit my wife. So then, why would it be okay for me to then in turn hit, spank, or use pain or the threat of pain on my kids? Well, in principle, it's the same thing. It's wrong, so therefore I don't do it. I don't need some guy in a lab coat or somebody with a PhD to tell me that. I didn't need some damn scientific study. I don't care about those things. I have my principles and I got my choices, and that's what I do. I don't need to defer to some other form of authority for me to make the choices in my life. I don't care what the facts are. I don't care what science says. And that's how you make choices in this world. You don't just follow behind warring cults within a failed religion. And that is why science is cringe and for nerds.